Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Born, and I'm so excited to have Moriah Hidden back with me on the podcast. As you know, we have been walking through my book, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation, and it's been so fun to share some of these innovation concepts with you and just dig into them more deeper. So we're going to continue down that path today, and here's what we're talking about today. Culture killers for innovation. And fun fact, we're not just going to talk about culture killers. We'll also dive into some of the ways you can cultivate innovation within your organization. So excited to have you back on the podcast, Moriah.
Thank you, Natalie, and excited to be back. I absolutely love this chapter and talking about culture and what kills innovation, a healthy team, what you can do to grow a healthy team. So I'm super excited to dive more into it. We're going to dive in straight to chapter 3. You start talking about alignment and how teams need to be aligned, but leadership needs to have that alignment so that teams can follow in that. So when it comes to driving innovation, how do you ensure that all levels of an organization are aligned with the overall strategic vision? And what tools or frameworks can leaders use to maintain alignment over time?
So I love this question because I was just talking to a leader the other day and we were talking about the rule of 7 times. And I said, have you ever been to Disney and they pick you up on the shuttle and then as they're taking you to the location, they repeat 7 times where you parked? And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah. So I said, honestly, that's the number of times it takes to get information into people's mind before they actually understand it and then can take it and run with it and execute on it. And so we were laughing about that. And they said, so the moment that I'm rolling my eyes is the moment that they get it. And I'm like, absolutely. And that's so true when we think about organizations. A lot of times I work with organizations to create, after they've created their vision, mission, and values, and we talked about that in some of the past episodes, we actually look at their strategic priorities. And sometimes we're looking 1 year out or 3 years out. And we talk about these strategic targets, but what typically happens is people take on too many targets in a year. So sometimes they're taking on up to 20. And then at the end of the year, they're really surprised that most of their targets were missed. And it's because it would be better for us to take on 3 or 4 core targets that everyone in the organization can work on instead of taking on 20 and then nobody's really monitoring them, keeping up with them, and then we're frustrated by the end of the year. If we think about it with New Year's resolutions, it's the same way, right? If we have 1 or 2, we're usually pretty good and we can accomplish them. But when we're like, I'm going to lose weight and I'm going to go to the gym 10 times a week and we start adding all these things on and then we're so shocked when we're just not winning. And organizations, unfortunately, they do it all the time. And so if we can choose 3 or 4 targets for the year, break those down to make sure everyone, even to the front line, understands what they're supposed to be focused on for the year. Guess what? We will actually hit our targets more effectively.
I love that. And I love your illustrations, rolling your eyes. You finally got it.
Yeah.
I think it's just all about communication throughout your team and in meetings and when you're passing in the hallways or anything, you're always on alignment with that, which is super important. I also love in your book that you talk about celebrating the milestones and you talk about, okay, let's do a quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, see where we're at. We can assess the situation and then we can also celebrate, which also encourages the team to be able to accomplish those milestones because everyone loves to feel celebrated. So
That's right. Well, and I even think about, the places I've seen this done the best, they break it down by quarter, like you talked about. And at the end of each quarter, there is a celebration. So imagine being like, okay, if we hit this goal, we're all going to Top Golf. Or if we hit this goal, we're all going out to lunch. Or I even had a company say, if we hit this goal, everyone gets an iPad. Like, how cool is that? That you just get a brand new shiny iPad if you hit this goal by the end of maybe by the end of the year. So being able to give people something that they can look forward to. I'll be honest, most employees don't look forward to the company earning all this money and then, them not getting anything out of it. So it goes back to the simple, what's in it for me, right? And as we're rolling out these goals, we have to ask, what's in it for each and every employee in the organization? If they hit these targets, what do they get to get excited about? And if we can figure out what that is, we actually can drive the behavior that we want. And so that becomes something where it's just the C level team rallying for this idea to everyone in the company rallying for it because we're all excited about the end result that we're going to get.
Yeah, that's good. And it comes down to team health of like boosting that morale and being able to rally around the one vision, goal, and strategic vision. Speaking about team health, it's often considered one of the foundational elements of an organization's success. How would you define what a healthy team is, and what are some early indicators that can help leaders assess whether their teams are thriving or facing challenges?
Oh, that's good. So in my book, I talk about Emma, and I talk a little bit about how she's struggling to receive feedback, to ideate with the rest of the team. And this happens more than we realize, right? The worst thing that could happen is somebody smiles in your face in the meeting. They look like they agree, and then they go out behind the scenes and tear everything apart that we just tried to build together. And that's actually some of the most insidious pieces of an unhealthy team. That is one of the biggest culture killers, is when you know someone's smiling and nodding, but they're not really smiling and nodding. They're waiting to plot your demise once they leave that meeting. And that is some of the biggest culture killers. And so we do have to approach those types of behaviors head on. We do have to confront those behaviors when we see them in the organization. I had someone on my podcast several episodes ago, and she said culture is the worst behavior that we allow. So if we allow someone behind the scenes to kind of tear up the ideas that we all sat in a room together and ideated on, then ultimately that reflects on our own leadership eventually. And so we have to confront those challenges. We have to speak into that person, and we have to ask them some hard questions about whether or not they feel, called to this team, to this role, to what we're doing, to what we're working on. And if they don't, that's okay. Let's figure that out. But what we don't want to do is just say, oh, that's so and so. That's how they always are. Well, that's a bad behavior. And if we allow that bad behavior to fester, it will grow in the organization. And so we don't want to allow that to grow. We want to stop it before it starts. And we can do that just through simply sitting down and asking them a series of questions. And in the book, I give you a bunch of questions to ask that can help you figure out, does this person really want to be on the team?
Yeah, that's good. I loved your story about Emma and how you were talking about how she was really skilled. And even if you are very skilled at what you do, if you cannot get along, you even said this, if you can't get along, you're not ready to grow. And if you can't grow, you can't innovate. And so I think it is important not only to, as a leader, to see who those team members are, but also to self-reflect and ask yourself those questions like, can I work with this team? Am I aligned with the values and the goals? Am I willing to work with my coworkers and really figure out that if you are that person, what would you say is the best advice to kind of reshift your focus to then be aligned with the team?
Yeah, this is the hardest part. Like, what if you look in the mirror and you realize that you're the
You're
person
the
that's like,
problem.
yes, you're the one stopping progress. I mean, nobody wants to admit that, man, we could be the one stopping the progress. Like, we might be the lid on the organization. My next question to you is if you find that, yes, it's me, I'm the lid on the organization, do you want to be coached? Are you willing to be coached? There's so much of leadership that's asking the question, is this a skill issue or a will issue? If it's a skill issue, skills can be trained. If it's a will issue and your will is just not there to go on, then it might be time to leave, right? It might be time to give that role over to someone who would be really excited about doing the role. But those are the hard questions we have to ask ourselves. And as leaders, we always have to ask ourselves, am I helping growth or am I impeding it? I remember a startup I worked for, and we loved the CEO of this startup. He was fantastic. And one day he announced that he was leaving, and we were all devastated. And he said, no, 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 you don't understand. I lead companies to 70 million. And once they hit 70 million, I know it's my time to leave because I like building, I like creating, but when it's time to operationalize or even take it to that next level, that's not who I am. And I appreciated his ability to say, if you want to continue to grow, I have to step away.
That's good. I can't go past this without talking about the gladiator that you talked about in your book. I love the gladiator, but it was so cool to see. There was the one scene that you talked about where Maximus and the gladiators are in the arena. They're about to fight a team that they are definitely the underdogs and they would not be able to win. but he kind of gathered them together and was like, hey, if we work as a team, we're able to accomplish this goal. And so I just love that because what you were talking about with Emma and all of this, you got to be a team in order to grow, and you can't grow past your weakest link. And like Emma, she was the weakest link. And so that's when you self-reflect, you look at the team, and then you have those conversations and you communicate. So I just think I love that story and I love the gladiator. So
Well, my favorite thing that Maximus says is, let's move as one. And when they interlocked their shields and they moved as one, like they were able to upset that whole crowd. Like they were able to upset how the script usually goes. And I think that's what you see when these startups come on the scene and they just blow it out of the water. And these large, entities are now like scrambling to try to figure out how to answer it. There's something very unique about being nimble. There's something very unique about being able to be flexible and to be able to respond to what's happening in the moment. But you can only do it if people are able to move as one. And a lot of times, people, you find that. And this is true in the military, like in times of peace. My husband talks about this all the time. He's like, in times of peace, you'll find the military fighting against itself sometimes. But in times of war, right, we're back to back and we're fighting the enemy. And oftentimes people need a common enemy. Otherwise, they turn internally and they make each other the common enemy. And so when I go into an organization and I see that, I'm always like, who's your biggest competition? Okay, great. Now they're your enemy. Like, let's figure out how to beat them instead of fighting each other. Because when you have a common enemy, you do tend to fight back to back instead of fighting face to face. And so that's really kind of the cool part of that illustration is there's so much that can be accomplished if we'll learn how to find a common enemy that's not each other, but maybe it's the market, the competition, where we want to be in a year, and what is stopping us from getting there. Let's make that the enemy and not each other.
yeah, that's good. So we talked about alignment and team health, and that's all internally, but let's look externally. And you talk about empathy and the lack of empathy when it comes to clients. So, how can a deeper understanding of customers' needs shape the design process, and what are some tangible ways empathy can benefit an organization by improving its products or services?
Yes. Okay. So first and foremost, we have frameworks for you. So if you head to setitonfire.co, there's actually an empathy map over there. And it might actually be good for you to click on frameworks and download that empathy map as we're talking about this, because this is to me a product development lost art. So let's think about you starting a business or you starting a platform or a nonprofit, whatever you're starting. Oftentimes people sit down and they say, what do I want? What am I passionate about? And that's how we start things. But unfortunately, if we're offering that to someone besides ourselves, we have to go outside of ourselves to get more information on what they care about. And so this empathy map walks you through how to actually do that. It walks you through, what are people seeing? What are they saying? What are they doing? What are they hearing? And so in the book, I actually walk you through an example of someone building a leadership platform and thinking about the leader that's going to be gleaning from that platform and asking some critical questions. Oftentimes, we are not asking these critical questions, so we're building the platform or the product for us. We're not building it for the client. And so this empathy map, it just gets you outside of your own world and your own group think, and it forces you out into the field to talk to customers, and it forces you to talk to people and really understand where they're coming from so that we can actually build the right thing for them.
That's good. And I love that you go into the definition of empathy, and it's basically summarizing of understanding someone that you don't have all of the context clues with. And you
Mhm.
go through all of you mentioned these, but you go through the questions to ask customers and the different feelings and different things to ask. Thinking, seeing, saying, doing, hearing, pains and gains, all of it. Can
Mhm.
you walk me through a little bit of logistically, what does it look like when you are building something and you're trying to understand what a client's point of view is in those attributes?
Yeah. So there's four ways we can listen to our customer, right? I mean, this is really simple. We can take a client out to coffee and we can just ask them questions, right? If they're your ideal customer for whatever you're building or launching, just take them to coffee and ask them the questions. But really what we're trying to figure out is like their perspective on the market, where they see your product going, how they see your product helping them. How does your product not help them? These are the pains and gains, right? So, and then it's really these listening sessions. I've actually pulled together listening sessions in different cities, different countries, where I bring a bunch of potential clients into one room and I actually have a sketched out product and I ask them to look at it, flip through it, and tell me why they like it or hate it. And it's so great because they just give so much feedback. And I've walked clients through this where they're walking their ideal customer through it, buy a mistake dinner, and we're sitting down together listening to why this product would or wouldn't work for them. And you just get so much information out of them of like, well, you know what, that's great, but I've tried that before and here's why it wouldn't work for me. And this really isn't effective. You know what would be really great if you would build this? I would actually use it. And that's really what we're looking for. We can also survey our customers, which, surveys are great and they do give us a good temperature check, but I think nothing is as good as sitting down and talking to someone face to face because when you ask them a question, they can build on it. And then observation, like this is the one that is most interesting. I have sat with so many customers thinking they use my product one way and then watching them use it in all these unintended ways. And I'm like, oh, why are you using it like that? And only when we observe a customer can we realize that, man, they're using it in unintended ways that I never expected. And I can now ask questions that, again, I wouldn't have even thought to ask because I had no clue that's how you're using my product.
That's good. We just talked about empathy maps. How does that lead into personas?
Yeah, so once you have this empathy map built, which is essentially how people think, what they're thinking about, what are they seeing in the world around them, we can actually use that empathy map to build out a persona. And in the persona, I have a real picture of a real person. It's my target avatar. Some people call them a ICP, right? Your ideal client profile. Either way, whatever you call it, it is that client that whenever you sit down and write, whenever you sit down and think about the next product you're going to build, that's the person that's at the front of your mind. So they're going to get an age. We're gonna figure out if they're married. We're gonna figure out if they have children. Do they have a dog? What brands do they enjoy? Do they wear, Lululemon? Do they wear Nike? Under Armour? Like, what are they wearing? Where do they shop? Where do they go? What social media are they on, if any, right? So you're going to ask all of these questions in order for us to understand our persona a little bit better. And then I literally have clients print out their persona and put it up somewhere around them so that every day as they're working, they're thinking through the mindset of their persona. It is so easy for us to think about what we want. But if we're not the customer, we need to be thinking about what the customer wants, and the personas get us there. Once again, head over to setItonfire.co. I have a framework over there where you can build out an empathy map, and then eventually that empathy map will flow into the persona. And these two things combined help us to be as effective as we can with really understanding our culture and our customer. And so what we want to do is rally our clients to give us information and feedback on what they want and who they are, and then that gets built into our persona. So that's really the goal of a persona. And if we're building anything, we need to have it so that we keep our customer at the center of everything we build.
Yeah, that's good. And it just comes back to alignment and being able to go from the bottom of what your customer, who they are, but what they want, how they use your product, to your team, making sure they're aligned. And then it all starts with the leadership, making sure that they're aligned, they're trustworthy, the values are all aligned. So I love this chapter. And do you have any final thoughts for our listeners today?
No, just go get the frameworks because I think that even if you're trying to visualize all this, it's just easier to download it and look at it, and you'll actually give you directions on how to walk through it as well and fill it out. So I feel like a framework is one of the best ways to learn is because we can actually walk through it and do it. So this is what you're going to use to launch your next idea, your next innovation, your next product, your next company, whatever you're launching, use this framework to get it done.
That's awesome. I love that you not only put visuals in your book, but you also have the resources that people can actually take the next step and be able to do it and logistically do it. Natalie, today was great. Where can our listeners find and follow you?
Yeah, so head over to innovationmeetsleadership.com, or you can follow me on any of the platforms at Innovation Meets Leadership. And like I said earlier, you can head over to setitonfire.co to download these frameworks and get started today, get moving, create these personas so that you really know what you're building and who you're building it for. And Moriah, it's been so great to have you. Thank you again for joining me and for interviewing me today.
Of course, happy to be here, and I can't wait for the next one.
Awesome. Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership. And visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.
Hey, my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. Click on the link to learn more. And don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.